So thanks for joining me today. Gold Class is like an integral part of ICAR Australia. So what I've done and what we're doing is that we're putting together a bit of a project or a series that allows the community to get to know our Gold Class repairers a little bit better. So you guys are actually the first of the series. So that's very exciting. Thanks so much. But I guess to kick ourselves off, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, your positions and the shop history, if that's okay.
You want to start, Gaz?
Yeah, okay. Well, my name's Garry Ma. Actually closer to 65 than what I am 60 nowadays, but we've got Dan's looking after the shop, but I think over the years I've had many titles: boss, managing director, loans manager, doctor, you name it. But just a brief history, it started with Dan's grandfather, my father, started the business back in about 1966, but it was actually running for many years before that, probably around about 1955, but it never really actually had a name. And so it started out in a shed at the beside an old house at West Pennant Hills. And then not sure whether it was the council had much say in it, and shop was moved over to a property. It was an old chook shed, believe it or not, out at Dural, and it was quite a large chook shed. And I can still remember going over there in the early days, learning how to shoot air rifles and drive cars and avoid snakes in the backyard, sort of thing. And so for many years, my father worked there, and then the decision was made to move to Seven Hills, and a property was rented. And that's where I started my apprenticeship after finishing my high school certificate at 11 o'clock in the morning. I was at work by 1 o'clock in the afternoon and never had any other intention except working for Dad. It was not that many years later, my father decided to buy a property not very far from where we're renting at Seven Hills, and that's where we currently are. And the purchase was originally just an empty block, and it was all excavated. The factory was built, and a few years later, the adjoining property was purchased, which is our current car park, and we ended up with about 3,800 square metres. So it sort of meant that we never had to move. Our property just kept growing and growing. And we've actually still got room to move if we ever need to as well. So I think that gives you sort of a bit of a history of the business. But my father and myself, and Dan included, have always been interested in training and learning. And I still remember going to Europe with Don Waite, who used to be the head of trades. And anyway, Don organised a trip for some young and upcomings. And I think I was about 23. I was actually probably the oldest boy. And it was actually just before I was going to get married. And we ended up going to Europe for a month. And it was on that trip that I saw Auto Robot for the first time. And it wasn't in Australia at that stage. Anyway, I still remember making the phone call back home and telling, Dad about, hey, Dad, you got to see this machine, wow. And anyway, he purchased one on my say-so at, 23-year-old. It was a bit daunting, and finally the machine turned up, and we were lucky enough that Ray McMartin from Sydney Automotive Paints, he was also interested in the machines. Anyway, we worked together with Ray for the next few years, attending expos and doing demonstrations and all that sort of stuff. And then we became a training facility, I suppose. So we had a lot of expertise with the auto robot system. Consequently, a few years later, Bill, my father, he loved touring and ended up going on a trip overseas with Don Wade again to the USA and visited one of the chief automotive sites. And anyway, on his return, he announced to say, "Oh, Gary, I'm going to send you to America to do a 1-week course." And of course, it was the obligatory Disneyland trip that had to happen along with it as well. So anyway, he sent us, me and another chap, Gary Herman, over there. Anyway, we arrived and I'm thinking to myself, you know, well, what are these fellas going to show me? You know, I've seen chassis repaired on, back then it was HQs, HJs, all those sort of Holdens, and got the shock of my life. And I found out there were so many things I don't know or didn't know. And I think that's what sort of held me in good stead for all these years, was that things that I know don't scare me. It's the things that I don't know really scare the wits out of me, because that's the thing that, you know, because our industry is changing so much. But anyway, a lot of the chief instructors were actually iCar instructors as well. So that was my first introduction to iCar way back then. Anyway, as that week progressed, they talked about analysis and repair plans, and I got to be honest, and it actually did go a bit above my head. So I had to knuckle down and read all the paperwork, and I started to understand what it was all about. Anyway, they were very good because they made it very simple. They put things in a logical order, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3. If something happened to step 3, come back, recheck your steps. So that was my introduction to iCar, was along with Chief. So when iCar came to Australia, it was actually a no-brainer on my side to get involved with iCar. And I started attending courses and soon realised that, well, this is not just for me. I need to get the rest of the boys involved in this as well. And back in those early days, there was no gold class or platinum level at that stage. It was just a matter of doing courses. So we had a very, very early start, and then started sending the boys to a few courses. And then I'll never forget, it was, I think it was the welding course, the spot welding course. And I asked the instructor of that day, I said, are you guys ever looking for other instructors, new instructors? And Mark turned around and said, yes, we are. He said, Gary, you'd probably be very good at it. So it was a little bit daunting. And so I put my hand up and we started that track, and I became an instructor for iCar. So next thing you know, all these course materials started turning up, and it was a huge, absolutely huge job getting involved and learning and understanding all these courses. And all of a sudden you start to realize, guess what? There was more things that I didn't know, that I hadn't read about, and it still hasn't stopped. So consequently, we ended up also becoming an Australian distributor for Chief Automotive Systems. We did trainer courses and work health and safety courses. So I was actually an authorised instructor for that. Back then it was OH&S. We did all sorts of courses that they just kept coming. It was just one after the other. There was basically no time that you weren't actually thinking about a new course or completing a previous one. So from very early on, you realise that the training never stops. You know, even today, even though I'm sort of semi-retired from the business, there's still so much training to do. And I think being a trainer has been one of the biggest bonuses for us, or for myself, is that you realise you can actually give something back. You know, is that the boys aren't learning by experience, and learning by experience, it usually means when they stuff something up, break something. So by all this training is that it's putting them years ahead of where they would have been, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So yeah, that's about the history of the business.
Thank you. Dan, I guess obviously you would have been quite influenced by Garry, and you would have discovered iCar Australia through him, but also through work. In regards to starting your journey with the Road to Gold class, how did you guys go about doing it?
Well, I think when Gaz said he started sending some of the boys back in that day, I was the boys.
True.
I think Dad did a course or two before I did. Then I jumped into it. But I had not been as a young tradesman. You're not really exposed to much training outside of your TAFE. So learning about identifying structural and composites and all that stuff, that was unheard of back then. The technology wasn't even really in the Australian cars, but it was coming. And then that trend increased. But now you're learning about stuff, and the next car that comes through the driveway, you're applying it. So I think that started for me in about 2004 or 5. I put money on that. I reckon I would have been Australia's one of the first and probably the youngest platinum individuals. I've got to check that record. But yeah, we have no intention of stopping. We're just, like Gaz said, we keep learning, keep growing, keep getting smarter, and keep applying it to our business.
Yeah, that's quite exciting and admirable. I know when you're talking about training and how it's quite continuous, which is really great. I know that it takes quite a bit of time and commitment. So how would your team, or how does your team go about, maintaining and completing these courses?
Bribery. we rather than send them away with homework or interrupt the working day, Dad's smart about it. We might knock off an hour or two early one afternoon, go through, give everyone pizza, have some drinks, do it in a classroom kind of environment, which we have here on site upstairs.
Yeah.
And then go through the information of the course, and then let them digest that information overnight, and then do the test sort of the next day. I say bribery tongue in cheek. Obviously, it's about a positive and just kind of fun learning environment, rather than a strict go away and learn, and tomorrow there's a test. For panel beaters and spray painters, it's a much more effective method. Yeah,
so it's quite collaborative and has like a sort of like a team approach to it, you'd say. Yeah. And do you do the learning via the virtual classes, or I know currently with the lockdowns happening, hands-on or in-house classes aren't really happening at the moment in New South Wales and Victoria, but were you doing virtual or online together, or in person, face-to-face?
No, we were doing face-to-face. Dad's the instructor and we're the students, so we do it all here. Dad's upstairs in his office. We see him exactly like what you see him now. We just peer through the window, and he's delivering courses, whether it's to assessors, whether it's speaking to people like yourself, or other people within iCar, or retail courses. I'm not sure how that's going right now, but like we were saying before, before we had this meeting, everything's kind of on pause right now. Everything's just really strange, but I've got a pile of paperwork here. I'm sure there's an iCar course there ready for me to go.
There's actually 2. There's 2 there.
He's on to you. Awesome. Well, tell us, I guess, about your team a little bit, because you've mentioned that you guys all do it together, which is great. Tell us a little bit more about your team, and if there's any, the training they've received, if there's any platinum members or coming up.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you exactly how many platinum members are, but I think it's most of us now. Which is obviously part of the gold class status. We've got to have X amount of percent with that platinum status, and they all wear it as a badge of honor. I'll be honest. Every time we have a toolbox meeting, guaranteed there's going to be some iCar certificates to hand out. If someone doesn't get their new card or their platinum status, it's a knock on the door and, did I get my platinum? They generally want it.
Yeah, I think in general, the boys actually look forward to the next course. And I think it's sort of like beforehand, we go back, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is the boys would start a repair and they didn't really have a plan. It was just, I did a Mazda last week in that way. It needs a replacement quarter. This week I'm doing a BMW and I just use that same methodology. That's what happened. Today, the boys, if we send a repair out for them, say a replacement quarter panel, for example, and they don't have the procedure with the car, they won't start. They'll come knocking on the office door and say, hey guys, Gaz, Dan or Michael, I need the procedure for this because otherwise I'm flying blind, right? So they really appreciate that they're doing it the correct way, so I think that's always very important. But over the years, we've had some absolutely great tradespeople work through the business. And I always think it's you call it a team, but quite often I more think of it as a family, because over the years, I've spent more time each week with the boys at work than what I have with my own family. So yes, you hear all the ups and downs of their family life and deal with all sorts of things. But, a couple of the guys that really come to mind, two of them have already retired. First one would be Harry Pearce, Dan. Harry Pearce was just a remarkable human being, realistically. If we talk about the trade, you could give him just about anything, whether it be a chassis, a rolled over Maserati, a collapsed crane. He could figure out how to bring it back to shape and get it right. But he was sort of one of those guys that could, if I said to Harry, mate, I've got to pull the kitchen out of this house and I want to put it upstairs at work. Oh, I can do that. Or I could turn around and say, Harry, I need a picture of Marilyn Monroe on that wall, 6x8. Oh yeah, I can do that. He could draw, fly a plane, do all sorts of things. So, but I think Harry's main attribute, he was a great trainer himself. And in the last few years, that's what we did with Harry, is we didn't actually we tried not to give him all the big chassis jobs, but he would just float around and train the younger guys. So he was the head mentor, right? So Harry was fantastic.
Harry's back. Harry's retired. He comes in part-time now and helps train for free. He doesn't want any money. I just buy him pizza. That's all he wants.
Can't keep him away.
And teach the boys his knowledge.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And then there was another fellow, Jimmy Can. Jimmy was a very good chassis man. And because repairing chassis is totally different to doing a structural repairer, fixing a monoframe. So a good chassis man was different thinking. So, and Jim was one of those guys. He did a lot of training with me. We did train the trainer together at UTS, and that was an interest. There's dozens of stories I could tell you. He was really good. Then we had Mark Heiler. Mark Heiler's still with us at the moment. I think Mark's been with us for over 20 years. Mark's a very good technician. How would I describe Mark? If something's wrong, he'll let everyone know about it. So he can be a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes. But that's Mark. But you give something to Mark and you know you don't have to worry about it. What about Dan? What about Chris Reddy? Started with us when he was, what, 15?
14, and now he's 29.
14, now he's 29. And from a very early on, I would put Chris up against senior tradesmen twice his age. You know, he was just worked things out, so neat. He is platinum. He's done all his welding courses, welding certificates, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, Chris has been an absolute gem to have on board. And then a few years ago, we had another fella, Michael Dixon, who is now our production manager. And so I think Mick's been very interesting because he's a very good technician himself, very good with chassis, very knowledgeable. But he's been a footy coach for a lot of his life. And quite often, it's quite interesting. You can actually see some of his coaching techniques come out when it comes to sorting out a disagreement in the shop, you know, on what should happen and how it should happen. So, yeah, Mick's been very good with us. But I think from my part of it it's all a team effort, you know, from everyone in the office, where it's the girls in the office to if someone's going to be washing a car. And I think I've washed more cars in my lifetime than I've had breakfast, but it's a team effort and you need everyone, the painters working together. And I think sometimes in shops, would you agree, Dan, there's a discrepancy between panel shop and paint shop. There's sometimes a little bit of tension. We get a little bit, but only a fraction of what I think happens in other places. And so what I've always looked at is that the panel beaters can actually do some of the paint work. Like they can edge out parts, they can do their own seam sealing. And I think it's that the ability to communicate what's got to happen to that job. As soon as they stop talking, that's when issues come up. You know, so I think that's about it for the team. You got anything to add to that, Dan?
I think it's important to mention that we've got apprentices in both departments, and we plan to expand on that moving forward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very aware of the skill shortage we've got nationally. We're seeing TAFEs shut down. We're seeing the dropout rate increase. We're seeing the sign-up rate rapidly decrease. So rather than shopping around for new staff members, we're finding just put on apprentices, teach them as quickly and as well as you can, and develop into fantastic tradesmen. We've had success doing that. We've had more success doing that than, you know, trying to hire the right person. You may as well start from scratch. So we've got an apprentice in both departments. Both of those guys, I think, in their second year. So probably after Christmas, we'll be looking for another apprentice in both departments.
So it seems like you guys are really big on nurturing people to make sure that they grow within the company of you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I guess if you had to choose one, what would be your favorite course or topic from all the courses you've done, or in Garry's instance, delivered?
That's
Okay.
probably a better one for you guys. You've done every course they've got, haven't you?
You've got
Just about, yeah.
a big pool to choose from.
I think you have to put it in time frames. You know, I think the earlier courses, even the fundamentals, you know, I never thought I'd be talking about with an apprentice things like the molecular structure of steel. But it all comes up and we start to understand, yeah, okay, well, one's got more carbon in it. And we're talking about the tensile strengths and the yield strengths. And I think one begs the other. So as you start to learn and do the fundamental courses, the other courses make so much more sense. Like you couldn't go to an advanced course and think you're going to understand it straight away. You're going to miss out too much information. I just completed some of the welding courses, the online ones. And I've got to be honest, I think that's probably impressed me more than anything that I've done for quite a while. And I I've talked to Dan and Michael at the workshop, and I've realised that MIG welding, for example, we have only ever used the absolute basics of our welding abilities in most of the panel shops, because we were never shown the advanced features on a lot of these machines. I'm not talking about hot starts and crater fill, all that sort of stuff that can be fine-tuned. I think that's been a real eye-opener for me. I've only completed that a few weeks ago whilst we've been at home with this pandemic. And but already I've sort of got a lot of things ready to deliver back to the boys at work. And I think it will improve their welding tenfold. So now that's going to be an online course. And I think that's probably going to be one of the, not a pilot course, but one of the first courses that you'll have to do to complete before you actually do welding certification, right? Because you really start to realize that these welders that we're using are capable of 100 times more than what we're actually currently using them. So yeah, the welding courses, that's the one for me. That's my big one at the moment.
All right. And did you have a favorite course, Dan, or topic that
specific course I couldn't tell you, but anything to do with heavy structural, whether it was the aluminium, I remember I was quite fascinated by it, because at that time we hadn't had a lot of exposure to that, and still have to this day limited. But that said, if something came in tomorrow, we know we can handle it. Yeah, the structural stuff definitely more than anything.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, actually I could ask Dan, what about the blueprinting course? That was a really good course. And I think the blueprinting was something that we all know a little bit about, but the blueprinting course puts everything into sequence. And I think even for us, we probably don't realize how much we've used that, because we did the blueprinting course probably 4, maybe 5 years ago now. And that has held us in very good respect of what's required when we're looking at damaged cars. So I look at what Daniel does, and Mick, our other, Mick Dixon, what he does in his job. And you can start to see, yes, they're thinking about blueprinting, you know, and it's now become, I suppose, an unconscious concept that they use. They're just doing it naturally now. So blueprinting would be another one that I'd throw out there for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I guess the last thing that before we finish up is, if for those considering starting their road to gold journey or any sort of training, what advice do you have on how they could potentially find success?
I think the big thing for anyone, and the young people, is going to be easy because they're going to be starting with it. I think the hard thing for a lot of senior tradespeople, senior workshop owners, all those sort of things, is they haven't actually sat in a classroom for quite a few years, and it is daunting. There's so much more information out there. So I think it's one of those things where for these people to talk to ICAR, especially the shop owners, the production managers, those sort of guys, and work out a training path so that they've got they know what to expect, you know. So yes, we're going to be doing this course in, you know, August. Next month, we're going to be doing another course, and they have that progression. And there is a lot of work to it. But I think these online courses are really going to help. I think people, you know, that they can be self-paced. They can open up, you know, spend half an hour on it, close it down, and come back to exactly where they were. When I have my virtual classes, one of the things I always tell the students is to, when they start doing their online courses, is to, they can copy and paste as much as they want or take notes, is to get that information down as quickly as they can, and really got to be careful taking all the notes. I got caught once at the airport. I thought I'd have a look at a course, one of the first ones I ever had a look at. And I thought, oh, I'll just quickly have a breeze through. Yes, yes. But then by the time I got through it, I thought, oh, I'll just have a quick look at the test. And then I realized that once you entered the test, you were locked out of the content of the course. So I basically had to go back and restart the whole thing when I got home, you know, a few days later. So, yeah, but yeah, so there's some really, really good content in there, that's for sure.
Thank you. And Dan, do you have any words for anyone who's looking at doing training or wanting to become a gold class shop?
Yeah, I think if a smash repair or body shop owner is happy with the status quo, by all means, don't train. But for the amount of complaining and everything we hear industry wide, that's not the case. So obviously, knowledge is the key if you want to improve and get better, and you know, be more competitive and be able to complete a wider scope of works. Then do it. If you've got it's an investment, not a cost. Mm-hmm. So you know, if you're happy doing bumper bars and door dings, by all means, you know, keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to do the next car with the big hit, you know, with all the exotic materials and structural damage and ADAS and everything in there, and you want to know that you can do it and do it properly, then you know this is just a requirement now. Yeah,
yeah. I'm sure that will leave some food for thought for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty much it. Again, thanks again for taking the time out to have a chat with me. Hopefully, it gives people a bit more of insight into L&M Smash Repairs, but also yourselves and Gold Class as well. And I'm sure some people find this really inspiring. So thank you.
Yes, Sabrina.